Good morning, Board. Bernadette Curry, County Council. I'm going to kick off the item due to the introduction of the legal changes that have occurred since the last one, and then hand it off to Bridget on the next step. But as the board knows, redistricting is the once-a-decade process or redrawing the political boundaries. And I know that it may seem like we just did it. It was, in fact, 10 years ago. So we're going to go start the process all over again. So next slide, please. So the law requires that the foundation of the redistricting is based on the annual or the decennial census, so federal census. By law, this was intended to have been concluded by July 31st, but due to COVID, was extended until October 15th. The process was further extended due to the West Coast wildfires as well as the hurricanes back east. And so the process itself has been delayed. The information itself was supposed to be given to the Congress no later than December 31st, but we heard as of last week that this information is not going to be provided until at least April 30th at the earliest. The problem here is that our process was to begin with the receipt of the information by April 1st. As a result, the timeline that we're going to be allowed to complete our process is going to be further condensed. So next slide, please. So the legal process itself is covered by both federal and state law, each of which is the primary focus is on the equal protection and providing restrictions against racial gerrymandering. The overall standard is that the districts must be based on the total population equality, and the term that's used for that is the total population in the county as determined by the most recent federal census. Unlike congressional districts, there can be deviations. They do not have to be perfectly equal. For supervisorial districts, there can be some deviations, and the law right now presumes up to 10% is presumptively constitutional in terms of a deviation in total population. This presumption could be overcome if we had there was some sort of challenge to how the maps were drawn. The key takeaway on this is the new requirements are that the population must be based on the actual residents, less those that are incarcerated. As the board may recall, in the 2010/2011 redistricting, there was a policy determination as to whether or not to include the incarcerated population. The law recently changed such that you can only include those incarcerated individuals that actually live or are their residents in Solano County. Next slide, please. So the new law is AB 849, chapter in 2019, and then ironically immediately amended before it was even went into effect. It's called the Fair Maps Act, the Fair and Inclusive Redistricting for Municipalities and Political Subdivisions Act. It sets forth the new process and requirements that we must include within this next round, and the following slides will go into it, but it applies to both cities and counties. And as I said, it's both the process as well as mandate certain public outreach. So next slide. So I think this is the meat of the matter for what is going to be included in the next process. This is the how the maps will be drawn. So as before, the items on the left indicate that which we were considering when we were drawing the map. The law now requires that we look at these in order of priority, going one to the next. There are 5, and then the overarching at the end with the direction. So first and foremost, it's to the extent practical, the supervisorial districts must be geographically contiguous. There's various things that the law goes into with regards to bodies of water and so on, but key takeaway is that they must be geographically contiguous. The next one is that the geographic integrity of local neighborhoods and, more importantly, the community of interest must be protected. And community of interest is defined as a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single supervisorial district for purposes of that district's effective or fair representation. There's more examples of how that goes into it, things like lifestyle, economy, demographics, geography, or political subdivisions, or the key one that obviously was most recently affected is place-based issues such as public safety, and one of that they reference is wildlife or wildfire concerns. So the next one is with regards to the extent practical, the geographic integrity of a city or census designated place shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. Clearly, right now we have 3 supervisors representing City Fairfield, 2 representing the City of Asheville, and it's those issues that we're going to have to be considering when drawing these new boundaries. Number 4 would be supervisorial district boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents, and to the extent practical, they must be bounded by natural or artificial barriers such as streets and the boundaries of the county. And finally, of the 5 priorities is that the supervisorial districts must be drawn to encourage geographical compactness in a manner that nearby areas of populations are not bypassed or in favor of more distant populations. So there must be, the districts must be tightly drawn. And then the overarching one is that the maps themselves shall not favor nor discriminate against a political party. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so before we draw the maps, obviously it was the Board of Supervisors' discretion with the assistance of Staff Technical Advisory Committee. That still is the process. However, what is also available to the board under Election Code 23001 is that the board can, by ordinance or resolution, establish a redistricting commission. And that commission can be independent with the authority to create its own boundaries. It could be advisory, which then makes recommendations to the board and the board chooses, or a hybrid approach between the 2 of them. The new law has various restrictions as to who can be part of this commission, and the appointment and selection of those commissioners themselves, as well as the subsequent limitation on political activities of those commissions. So should the board choose to form a commission, staff would then return at a later date with more information on the exact process. Next slide. So now it's the when. Before we had by the first day of November, now the requirement, and somewhat convoluted, it's 174 days before the next county election, which bottom line is it actually has to be adopted. The ordinance has to be adopted by December 15th, which is obviously in advance of the June 7th primary. Given this deadline, staff is recommending that we target November 2nd, according to your board calendar, as the date of the introduction of the ordinance, with an adoption on November 9th, so that we can then meet the required timeline. Obviously, we've got an incredibly short timeline to start making this by November. So next, please. Next. Okay. So before, you had to have one public hearing reviewing the maps prior to the public hearing in which it was adopted, and the requirement now is at least 4. This is the bare minimum. One of them obviously has to be drawn conducted before the maps are drawn. 2, where you have a public hearing on proposed maps, and then 1 must be convenient to people who are working, so it has to be on a Saturday or Sunday or any time after night, Monday through Friday. Okay, next slide. This is also now mandated under the Fair Maps Act, which is a significant public outreach that we did not have before. There has to be obviously 7 days before the adoption, which then tightens our timeline even further, meaning that we're targeting the end of October for this process to be complete. There must be media outreach. It must be translations if requested, and as well as the fact that this one's key is that you must consider and or receive any maps or testimony that from the public, either submitted in writing, electronically, however the public chooses to, but the public has an opportunity to submit their own map. Next slide, please. Another key requirement for the new law is that the record-keeping requirement, we must maintain documents or all public comments that are submitted within 2 weeks and have that posted, as well as maintain the website for a minimum of 10 years. So this process and the procedures for testifying must be put out to the public so that everybody understands or has a clear opportunity to provide input. Next slide. This is a simple one. Before, there could be a change. At this point in time, the law now says we've got one chance to get it right until the next census in 2030. Next slide. Staff, as we had done before, both in the 2001, 2011, or those are the ones that I was around. I think Rosetta can speak to the earlier ones. With prior years, we're recommending that staff be, there's a technical advisory committee consisting of staff from the necessary or the impacted departments to provide our resources and assistance in the process. In addition to this, we're suggesting that we retain the assistance of a demographer or an experienced consultant, given the various priorities that are now included in the federal map, the FAIR map set. And with that, next slide. I'll turn it over to Rosetta on the next step, and we will seek direction on where we go from here.
Thank you, Bernadette. So, board members, as you can tell, if we don't get our data till April, and we have to be done by October roughly, in order to meet all the legal noticing and public engagement process, we definitely need some direction from the board today, both on whether you are interested in having a redistricting commission, and if so, what form that might be, because we have to bring back the documents for you to actually establish that. And we also have to bring back the process for the appointment of those individuals or the selection of those individuals based on the way the law is written. In the meantime, we have identified in the general expenditure budget money to retain a demographer or a consultant. We might need more than one. Because we're also going to have to prepare the public engagement and information plan and actually establish the calendar for you so that it gets on your calendars and the public can track with us what's happening. So, and then as you see at the bottom, we intend to create a website for all of that information so people can go to one place. So with that, I'm looking for some general direction from the board. I want to thank Bernadette for doing the legal legwork. Bill Emlin is part of the team in our office that will be working on this, as well as Michelle Hefner when she returns. This will be one of her projects. She will be back in the office next week, she tells me. So we're working on building your technical team to get started on the legwork to support you, but we're looking for some direction from you today.
Okay, with that, any board member comments?
Yeah, John, Jim.
Yes, Jim.
I do not support the redistricting commission, and for a lot of different reasons. I mean, all of us supervisors, we know our communities, we know where these disadvantaged communities, we really understand the demographics of these communities. What I would recommend, or what I support, is that we have the technical advisory committee. We have the advisory committee made up of citizens. Each supervisor could recommend a certain number of people, and then the board of supervisors makes the ultimate decision on how the boundaries are drawn. And so that's kind of the hybrid. And I guess I would ask Bernadette, now, does that meet the state requirements if you have those three groups?
Yes, it does. Yes. We can come back with regards to the actual advisory if it's going to be how you select those people. But yes, that would meet the intent.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just think in fairness that each supervisor could, select a certain number of people. And that advisory group would receive all of the technical information that the technical advisory committee, and they then would vet and make sure that we meet the intent of the law, and that we're not splitting up disadvantaged communities and so forth. And then they would advise the board of supervisors ultimately to make the decision.
Through the chair, this is Supervisor Brown.
Yes, Monica.
To continue on with Supervisor Spearing, would we not still need a demographic consultant, and the timeline? I'm curious as to who's doing all of that if you look at the last slide, because all of those things need to happen. So I'm just not sure, Supervisor Spearing. I understand the advisory committee, but I would not think the advisory committee would do all the rest without support from the county.
Oh, no, that's why I said there's three groups. You got the technical advisory, and they would deal with all the demographics and all of that data, and they would feed that data to the advisory council or committee, and then they would make a recommendation of the board, and the board would be involved in that too with the technical advisory committee that is established. But no, the things you're pointing out, Monica, would have to be addressed.
Okay, because I didn't hear it. That's why I'm bringing it forward.
Well, maybe I've been around Jim so long, I understood that everything below the first bullet, he was in support of. And I think that's what you're saying too, Monica. And so whether we do a commission or a citizens advisory group is really the question itself. I was going to ask that we at least consider everything below the first bullet as something we wanted to do, and then we could think about the other part, the first bullet question, as to what we do there. Is that fair, Jim? Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's fine. That is correct. So I agreed with Supervisor Brown that those have to be included. Yeah. And so.
Through the chair to county council, yeah. So how is that different from a commission? That is, I mean, essentially, it's one of the different types of redistricting commissions.
My understanding is the redistricting commission actually makes the boundaries, and the board has very little input on that.
Right. But we're talking about three options. I don't know who's not muted, but somebody is not muted. We have three different options for a redistricting commission, and Supervisor Sparing has put forward essentially one of those, the first one, the advisory one, which was the one that I wanted to do, but you stated, Supervisor Sparing, in your statement that you didn't want to do the commission, even though it essentially is. So are we going to call it something? I mean, how does that work? Can we go forward with a redistricting commission and choose the advisory option? What is the problem? Because that's essentially what we're saying we're doing, right? Or what is being proposed.
No, I do not support the redistricting commission, which actually draws the boundaries and actually presents those boundaries. What I'm proposing we do is we have a technical advisory committee, and then you have an advisory committee that each board member could appoint so many members. I'm not sure how you want to do that. As Bernadette said, we can discuss that. And then that advisory group would make it a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, but the Board of Supervisors would make the ultimate decision and would be involved in the process as the technical advisory committee is gathering data. I just don't want the redistricting commission where they actually draw the boundaries and the board does not have input on that. And that's
I understand, Jim, and I think that's what you're choosing though when you say advisory. So together those on the advisory board of essentially the Solano Redistricting Commission would put forward a suggested map, not be able to, like the independent, and make those decisions on their own. It would always come back with the advisory for support of the board. So I don't know what the nuance is between the two, and maybe Bernadette Curry could help clarify that.
Alicia, if you go back to slide number 6, it details that the commission is really independent as opposed to the advisory, as opposed to a hybrid.
But
go back to slide 6.
Advisory, the commission recommends proposed district boundaries to the board.
The advisory, yes. Go back to slide 6.
We're moving it back right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if I may, so obviously the first one is independent with the authority to make its own. And so that would be, it's really the independent redistricting commission. It comes up with its own map, it then decides and brings it forward. Advisory, under the law, says an advisory redistricting commission is composed of residents of the local jurisdiction to change the legislative body's district boundaries or to recommend to the legislative body changes to those districts. So that's what I heard Supervisor Sparing is looking at, is that advisory would be making those recommendations to the board. It could be based on the process. It could be recommendations on communities of interest to be included. It could be recommendations on the demographics themselves,
Right.
or the recommendations on the map, depending on how fast we can get this process going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just think I think what Supervisor Barron is proposing is essentially just that, the advisory piece of the redistricting commission. I just don't think he likes the word the term redistricting commission. So I'm not quite sure how different.
The difference is that a redistricting commission actually draws the boundaries and you, the Board of Supervisors, have no input. That's the difference, and I don't support that. I support having you could call it a redistricting advisory council that have appointed members, and they would advise the board, so, the whole process is vetted properly.
Yeah,
But that's the difference.
I support what you're putting forward. I'm just trying to figure out how is it any different than what's being proposed here in terms of a redistricting commission with the advisory option. That's all.
So I think that obviously words always matter. I think commission implies too much power, too much independence. I think number B, an advisory committee making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors with the help of all our technical staff and all the other things we need to consider. I wouldn't want a hybrid approach. Certainly, I'm supportive of B, the advisory committee.
Chair Vasquez, this is Supervisor Mashburn.
Yeah, Mitch.
Yes, sir. I also would support B, regardless of the terminology that we use. Although I agree with you that commission implies a certain amount of authority. I would not want to relinquish the board's responsibility or authority with regard to this redistricting issue. So I would say that we should have a group that makes technical recommendations to the board that's made up of demographers and all those folks from a legal standpoint who have to advise us. And I might add the demographer that the city of Vacaville used for our districts was great and was able to break it down for us and the public in a very understandable fashion. They were really good folks. That said, having individuals from the district appointed by the board to advise us on how those lines should be drawn up, I would absolutely support. So that's my input on the recommendations. Thank you.
Chair, Supervisor Hannigan, I'm going to get off of that, but I want to talk about I think it is important that we hire good consultants, and I imagine they're in hot demand right now. So,
Right now.
Yeah, we're as soon as this meeting's over, we got to, I'm sure Bridgetta understands that this is somebody that needs to be hired, and I know within our staff, it will be extremely helpful to have consultants to put together this webpage and do the calendaring. And I mean, it just seems to me that staff time is so focused on other things, and this is an added, and that would be very helpful to keep moving this item forward. So I completely support that. I do support an advisory, if it's, whether it's a commission or not. I don't necessarily support somebody saying, here are your lines, you got to live with them, which I would, but given the choice, I think having public input is extremely important, and I'm very thankful that this new redistricting process requires robust public input. We are a broad county, if you will, in terms of demographics and locations, and whether you're Sacramento area or Bay Area, it's really important for us to be able to reach all of the corners. And so I wholeheartedly support hiring consultants to help with that effort.
Any other board member comments? If not, I'll open it to the public. Alicia, anybody on the phone wishing to speak on this item?
We do still have one caller from the public on the phone. Caller, if you wish to speak on item 11, please use *6 to unmute yourself and state your name. Sir, I do not believe he wants to speak on this item.
Well, then we'll take it back in the hands of the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Bill.
this is Bill. Hey, I just wanted to ask, these meeting formats are always interesting. I'd like to ask Bernadette, in terms of what Supervisor Spearing is suggesting, is there much of is it possible under the law to have something less formal in terms of a citizen committee as compared to doing a citizens committee under B, which is the advisory commission under the law?
So the law requires, or the law provides, that the board may. So it's quite permissive. With regards to advisory, to actually finish what Supervisor Hannigan was talking about, I think they're all redistricting commissions in one form or another. It's the level of authority for which the board would then delegate to that particular body. From what I heard from the direction here was that we would need to formally create it. Like I said, that there are certain requirements. The law for an advisory one, it cannot be staff, it cannot be an elected board member, it cannot be a family member of a supervisor or any of their paid staff or campaign staff. So my recommendation would be, if we're going to do that, that it come back by resolution. We establish the process by which each board member would appoint, or an application process for each particular district. But again, because, or what I'm hearing though, is that the board ultimately wants the authority to make its own decisions. For the advisory, it depends on how much involvement in the process that you want. And at that point in time, then it would be a formal creation.
So, Bernadette, could we bring that aspect of it back? A couple of pros and cons and what that might look like. I think we're all in agreement with the rest of it, all the bullets below that commission bullet at the top.
John?
Yeah, Jim.
Supervisor Spearing, could we ask staff to come back with a recommendation as who should be on this advisory committee? I really think that it has to be a very diverse group, and it's got to be reflective of the county, that there should maybe be an ag person, someone from the business community, someone from the faith community. I mean, just give us the variety, what meets the intent of the law, but make it as diverse as possible so we really get, I think, some good, on the ground, sort of in the trenches advice as we go ahead and develop this plan. But I'm just talking about, you'd have three, what I was proposing, you'd really have just kind of three groups. One is the Board of Supervisors, the other is the Technical Advisory Committee that put all the rest of those things that Monica was talking about. And the third is the advisory group, that this is all vetted through, and that, they confirm that, and help look at the boundaries, that they're fair and equitable. And so that's what I was proposing. But I really would like to have some definition as to who's on that advisory group, so no groups or any sectors of Solano County are not represented.
Thank you, Jim. Good comment.
For the chair, I just wanted to add on to Jim, just to sort of expand it.
Sure.
Maybe a recommendation to the number of people that would be on this advisory committee. Whether it's, individual supervisors are appointing 3 or 4 people, what is the size? I know there's challenges with that, but if we're going to touch all the different types of areas, like Supervisor Spearing just brought up throughout the county, we're probably going to need a broad group. This is my first opportunity going through redistricting, and I think that's the case for Monica as well as for Mitch, except for he did it in the city of Vacaville. So looking forward to this process, but also making sure that it is inclusive of all of our districts.
Thank you. In looking in the past, I was here for the 2000 or the 2010. 2000, I was an aide, but the amount of interest in it was huge, and there was a number of board meetings. And I like the fact that they've now indicated at a minimum we have to have 4. I would say, if I'm looking at it, maybe it's 6. Being the evening and the weekend one, outside of maybe the other 4 meetings we'd have in moving forward with this. And the acceptance of maps. I remember the 2000, there was a proposal from a group that called for the river district, which included all the communities that are along the bay and the river as one unique district. So there are lots of ideas out there. Certainly you have to put the challenges of meeting all those requirements into your map and making sure that it meets all those. To Jim's comment about having a diverse group. So is there enough direction, Bridgetta?
Yes, and we'll be back the first meeting in March with all the pieces that you've asked for to the best of our ability for the next round of direction.
All righty. Do we have to formally, I'll ask Bernadette.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll adjourn this meeting to our next meeting, which is...
Excuse me, Chair.
February 9th at 10 a.m.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Chair.
Are we not going to do member comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. Good thing you're there, Monica. We'll start with you then.
Okay. Well, I was hoping maybe we could take a 10-minute break in between before we go to closed session. But what I'd like to
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do, Mike Martin, who's the former mayor of Winters and currently a trustee at Solano Community College, called me, and he wanted me to thank the staff. His walnut farm burned. He lost 11 structures. And a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, when the county came in and everything was cleaned up in 2 days, he was just astonished. So on behalf of Mike, because I promised him I would do this, thank you to the staff for working with him, because as everybody knows, the fire was devastating, let alone losing your